You know something is wrong when an American Affidavit of Probable Cause. Part 10. The Journey On continued. These are the greediest fellows I ever saw. With all my exertions, I can't satisfy their pocket, though I keep the mill going day and night. Mr. Secretary, here is a dispatch. We have captured 1 prisoner and 1 gun, a great victory. Ah, well, telegraph to General Dix immediately. All this reminds me of a most capital joke. Officer, I'm told that Snooks called me a humbug. Take this warrant and put him in Fort Lafayette. I'll teach him to speak against the government. They say the Tallahassee sails 24 miles an hour. Well then, we'll send 4 gunboats after her that can sail 6 miles an hour, and that will just make enough to catch her. Give us more greenbacks. Compound interest. Give us more greenbacks. $10.40. Named after the bonds Lincoln sold to pay off Union war debt, so called because they could be redeemed after 10 or 40 years. The IRS scam, the old version. The Internal Revenue Service, Inc. is hired as an accounting service to keep track of credit accruing in the account of John Quincy Adams, an estate trust created by the United States, Inc. under the laws of the Washington, D.C. municipal government and independent international city-state. The associated 9-digit master account number is used as an employer number written like this, asterisk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, asterisk, representing the credit side of the account. The IRS, Inc. is hired to perform the billing service of the Governmental Services Corporation and keep track of the debt accruing against the account of John Quincy Adams, using the master account number as a taxpayer identification number written like this, 123-45-6789, and representing the debt side of the account. You, the living man, called John Quincy Adams, are presumed to be a voluntary withholding agent responsible for keeping these accounts balanced. But you are never told anything about this job or how to do it, so you mistakenly pay the bill owed by John Quincy Adams out of your own pocket. The IRS scam, the new version. A new version of the Internal Revenue Service, Inc., run by a new Federal Reserve, all ultimately run by the UN Corporation, takes over. Note: you are still presumed to be a volunteer withholding agent, and still not told what that means or what to do or how to do it. Yet, when you sign a 1040 form every year, you swear under penalty of perjury that you are a withholding agent and that you did the job correctly, or else. What should happen but doesn't? The IRS should send you a statement showing how much is owed by the John Quincy Adams account number 123-45-6789. Along with a clearly marked voucher or payment coupon asking for permission to request transfer of credit from John Quincy Adams account number 123-45-6789 to zero out the master account. This merely requires you to sign the voucher in upper and lowercase signature, John Quincy Adams, dated, and the statement, accepted one time only for settlement of account as of the date and in the amount shown. That authorizes the IRS to bill the Internal Revenue Service or vice versa in the new system and allows the transfer of credit between the employer account and the taxpayer account. That is what you should be doing as a withholding agent, but because you don't have a foggy notion what should be going on, and because as a withholding agent you are still required to settle the account somehow, you get stuck paying for it with your own labor, again, voluntarily. So all these years you have been voluntarily donating all this money in behalf of John Quincy Adams, a SESTA-QV estate trust created under Washington, D.C. municipal law and operated out of Puerto Rico. As a trust, John Quincy Adams is a corporation, so all profit it makes above expenses separated from capital is income. The living man, John Quincy Adams, never has income, only private property accruals. So John Quincy Adams owes an income tax. And what is that tax for? Technically, it is an excise tax on the privilege of importing revenue to Puerto Rico. They tax you, the living man, for the privilege of donating your money to them, and they literally laugh all the way to the bank, which, unknown to you, set up your account in the name of John Quincy Adams without your knowing consent. This is an international crime known as unlawful conversion. Congressman Louis T. McFadden, co-chair of the House Banking Subcommittee, recognized it for what it was and objected to this criminality at the time it was instituted in 1934. He lodged his complaint with the House Judiciary Committee. His charges are still waiting to be heard. Public lien. Let it be known to all parties, national and international and global, that a public and commercial lien is hereby established upon all assets and profits, all titles, deeds, and offices, successors, assignees, and agents, all agencies, departments, subsidiaries, subcontractors, affiliates, franchises, and franchisees of the following beneficiaries of this criminal fraud scheme. The City-State Municipality of Washington, D.C., the City-State of Westminster, aka the Inner City of London, the British Crown Corporation, the Vatican City-State, the United Nations City-State, the UN Corporation, Japan, Canada, the United States of America, the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the IMF, BIS, IBRD, World Bank, AIIB, U.S. Treasury, the United States Congress, E Pluribus Unum, the United States of America, the Federal United States DBA, the United States of America Minor, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, Vatican Bank, DTC, DTTC, Fidelity Group, Puerto Rico, Goldman Sachs, all Federal Reserve banks et alia in sum total. This lien is in favor of the living inhabitants of the land jurisdiction of the continental United States and their states on the land, the people inhabiting the land jurisdiction of Japan, Canada, Australia, the nations of the United Kingdom, the European Union, and wherever these evils have visited throughout the planet Earth, and is hereby incorporated in full as part of the attached affidavit of probable cause. Summing up. The law, and public policy. Law is very precise, a mathematical equation. For example, the Mosaic Law says, "Thou shalt not kill." Thou means you, John Doe and Joe Schmo, subject. Shalt means shall, means by volition, will, design, motive. Not means the opposite, the negation of what follows, negation. Kill means to deprive of life by any means, action. This law could be restated as positive law. Thou shalt preserve life. It means the same thing, just said without the use of negatives. It puts a different spin on how we perceive the same truth. Instead of refraining from killing, we are motivated to preserve life. Positive law is stronger than negative law because it shifts mode from passive to active. Not only must you refrain from killing, you must actively support preservation of life. Some people, including governments that pretend to represent a great many of us, don't obey the simplest law from the highest authority. So it is perhaps silly to think that law is valid or useful at all. If we can't dope out the meaning of 4 words and obey them, what hope is there? The governmental services corporations and their various agencies have promulgated an estimated 80 million laws, and every federal state in the Union passes somewhere between 200 and 300 new laws per year, with some passing more than that. In 10 years, that's 2,000 to 3,000 new laws just at the federal state level that everyone is supposedly obligated to know, obey, enforce, and perhaps most importantly, pay for enforcing. No wonder we are taxed into poverty. No wonder Mr. Obama's idea of stimulating the economy is merely to create more and more government jobs. He and everyone else involved in administering the Governmental Services Corporation look only at their corporate bottom line, failing to grasp the fact that they are acting as parasites upon the people they are supposed to be serving and protecting, and that parasitism, carried to the extreme, inevitably kills both the host and parasite. All these 80 million plus laws are not laws. They are codes, statutes, regulations, and administrative rules, meaning that nobody actually elected to create or repeal law had anything to do with making up these laws. All bona fide law in America has to be promulgated by legislative due process by properly sworn deputies of the land jurisdiction. It is required to have an enactment clause detailing exactly who, what, when, where, why, and how, and by what authority it was enrolled as a law, and of whatever political entity created it. From this we can judge the validity, jurisdiction, and authority of the law. The enactment clause tells us if a law applies to us, all actions proceeding from actual law are lawful. Tellingly, law does not have an enactment clause, because it is understood to be just an in-house private rule of the corporation adopting it. All state statutes recorded in America since 1860 are laws, not laws. This is because government has been operated in default as a military dictatorship and in international jurisdiction as a corporation ever since. It is incompetent to create law. The Federal Code consists of 50 titles and thousands of subtitles and sections and subsections that represent the law of the federal corporation. That is, internal house rules that govern how the federal corporation is supposed to operate. Which federal corporation? Certainly not the United States, Inc., which repealed all titles of Federal Code except Title 50. When suits are brought based on violation of Federal Code, all we are doing is saying, hey, the corporate leadership said you were going to operate according to this rule, and instead you are doing this. State statutes and Federal Code are administrative law, not actual law at all. All actions proceeding from enforcement of such laws are legal, but not necessarily lawful. Such a system can be perfectly legal and yet against the actual law. Everything Adolf Hitler did was legal, but as the Nuremberg trials clearly established that the genocide, theft, and destruction caused by the Nazi regime was against the law. It was criminal and recognized and prosecuted as such by the international community. Similarly, it can be perfectly legal to evict someone from their own home under the pretense that they received a loan that they didn't receive, or jail them on the pretense that they owe corporate taxes when they have never operated as a corporate entity at all. But these and similar activities are in fact a form of inland piracy based on securities fraud and identity theft, and they are against the law. As law, the Federal Code and federal state statutes represent only private in-house rules of a corporation and its state franchises. It is the same way with public policy and with resolutions. Since 1933, the U.S. government, that is, the federal corporation, has been issuing public policies and resolutions that are perfectly meaningless except as good intentions. That's why appeals to House Joint Resolution 192 fall on deaf ears. Not only was that resolution offered as the good intentions of a now defunct corporation undergoing bankruptcy reorganization, resolutions made by Congress are exactly the same as New Year's resolutions made by Anita K. Flopdoodle. The only way that such laws, public policies, and resolutions can be enforced by the victims of this trickery is when we interpret these published codes, regulations, statutes, policies, and resolutions as contracts and prosecute them as commercial contracts that have been defaulted upon in the foreign jurisdiction of international admiralty. More generally, if things are bad enough, we can address the corporations responsible in terms of their failures to abide by their charters and demand their liquidation of the Global Estate Trust. All corporations on Earth, including the banks and the so-called national governments that are functioning as corporations, are at the end of the day created and owned by the Pope. They exist and operate under forms of law created by the Roman Curia for the administration of the Global Estate Trust. The Uniform Commercial Code can be regarded as the administrative law of the Global Estate Trust. If things are rotten in Denmark or the United States or Scotland or anywhere else for that matter, all the roads still lead to Rome. The Vatican holds the charters of all the corporations responsible for this mess. That's why when Pope Francis ordered the various perpetrators to come into compliance with their charters, their response should have been, "Yes, sir." All this law and the misadministration of law is really just the in-house business of the Global Estate Trust and its many, many franchises running amok. This kind of law has nothing to do with the living people that the Global Estate Trust is supposed to honor, serve, and protect. It is law meant only for the corporate entities and their employees. It is their law, not ours. That average people have been improperly miscategorized as employees and as franchisees and even as franchises is apparent and is the subject of this affidavit, but this is a corruption brought about by politicians, military commanders, and church leaders who have shirked their duty, disrespected their offices, and abused our trust. It is owed real and lasting remedy, not just relief for individuals. Actual law, however, is a different matter. There are principles of natural law that surpass and transcend all principles of law that have ever been established by mankind, and which are present at all times for our discernment and enforcement as living, sentient beings. Natural law includes the right to life, to freedom, to work, to trade, to share, to think, to speak, to act, to move about freely, to meet with other men and women, to travel wherever we wish to go, to have the enjoyment of land, to live peacefully and securely in possession of our homes, businesses, farms, vineyards, orchards, and whatever else we create, to defend ourselves and our rights, and to dream and think and plan and enjoy the fruits of our intellect. Indeed, all of our rights enshrined by the founders as stated in the Declaration of Independence, 1776, are natural rights that derive from natural law, and they are unalienable. We cannot be made alien to ourselves. We cannot be redefined as things simply via the use of a name. We are not corporate franchises, trusts, transmitting utilities, and so on. Our natural rights are not subject to lien. Our right to travel, for example, cannot be subject to taxation, nor can it be licensed. No individual man or group of men has any right to interfere with us in the exercise of any of our natural rights, so long as our actions do not harm others or their property. This is the venerable essence of common law, and common law is what every man, woman, and child living on the land of the 50 States United is owed by the Global Estate Trust and its trustees. Thus, we must be set free and supported to convene our grand juries without interference by the British Crown, to hold free elections in each county, to convene common law courts to serve the land jurisdiction, to elect sheriffs on the land, to elect judges to serve at common law, to elect state legislatures responsible for the jurisdiction of the land, to have free access to all the court, trial, jail, and other facilities that our labor has paid for, and to be obeyed as the rightful heirs of the land jurisdiction of the United States regarding all matters pertaining to the land and its resources. Those who have merely pretended to represent us must be recognized as actors and charlatans involved in a vast fraud scheme, in which they occupied private corporate offices instead of similarly named public offices they were elected to serve. Their predation upon the peaceful inhabitants of the land jurisdiction must be recognized as inland piracy and unlawful conversion, securities fraud, and identity theft, another form of fraud. Great Britain has benefited for over 4 centuries and through 2 world wars from its original colonies, but the age of imperialism is long gone. It is time for Britain to do its duty as the comptroller of the international jurisdiction of the sea with diligence and integrity, to stop all piracy, including inland piracy, to root out slavery, peonage, press-ganging, and satanic worship wherever it is found, to honor its treaty obligations, and to release all false claims, titles, and agreements obtained under conditions of deceit and duress. Consent. The difference between rape and making love is consent. The difference between a gift and armed theft is consent. The banks and their governmental services corporations have disrespected the vital element of consent, and have turned deaf ears when Americans who are private citizens of the continental United States have clearly said, "I do not consent." I do not consent to be represented by these actors. I do not consent to contract with these organizations. I do not consent to have the interest due from the investment of my resources controlled by and used to benefit these organizations. I do not consent to donate my labor, my bank accounts, my retirement accounts, my land holdings, or any other private property to these organizations. I do not consent to be taxed to death, harassed, or obligated financially by my employees. I do not consent to letting any government corporation use me and my private property as collateral for its debts. I do not consent to being ordered to buy anything from anyone. I do not consent to being prosecuted in any foreign jurisdiction of the law. I do not consent to any presumption that I have ever agreed to any political status subjecting myself or my estate to any incorporated entity whatsoever. I do not consent to be licensed when I am exercising a natural right. I do not consent to be named as if I were a public resource now or ever. I do not consent to the large number of self-interested demands, presumptions, and predatory practices of those who have been entrusted as my employees to provide 19 enumerated services. The banks, their governmental services corporations, and the politicians responsible have done precisely what we, as their employers, have told them not to do. They have attempted to alienate us from our natural standing and identity. They have attempted to lean our most precious material interests for their own benefit. They have acted as criminals and must be set straight concerning the law and their contractual obligations without further delay. Most importantly, they must relearn the importance of consent, for they no longer enjoy the consent of the governed and do not enjoy the consent of their peers either. They have no granted authority to carry on business in the manner described by this affidavit of probable cause. Purchase a hard copy of this book at Amazon.com or download a free PDF copy at states.americanstatenationals.org. Click on the red Education tab at the top right of the page. You will find it here.